April is the cruelest month. Breeding lilacs out of dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain.
Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers.
Summer surprised us, coming over the Starburgersia with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colony and went out in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Bin gar keine Russen, Stamm aus Litauen, echt Deutsch.
And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousins, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free.
I'm Dave Getchick, publisher of the Pudd'nhead Press and sponsor of many literary events in Chicago, including our annual popular Bloomsday in Chicago celebration of James Joyce's Ulysses. We started that event in 2004, the 100th year anniversary of the day the book takes place. This year, 2022, was the 100th year anniversary of the publication of Ulysses. It is also the 100-year anniversary of the publication of one of the most famous and influential poems of the 20th century, The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Some of its subject matter needs to be looked at through a 100-year-old lens, and is a sometimes difficult poem told in many voices. But experiencing The Wasteland is well worth the effort and perfect for a multi-person performance. To talk a little bit about The Wasteland and its onstage production by the Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble, I'd like to introduce author, educator, playwright, and host of our Bloomsday in Chicago, Mr. Jeff Helgeson.
Thanks. It really is a pleasure for me to try and say a few things about The Wasteland and its presentation by the Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble. As Dave Getchick mentioned, it has now been 100 years since the poem was originally published in 5 sections as extensively edited by Ezra Pound, first in England within the inaugural issue of T.S. Eliot's quarterly literary journal, The Criterion, during October of 1922, and then a month later in the United States within a periodical called The Dial. The Wasteland had been written between 1918 and 1921 in the immediate aftermath of World War I, the Great War, the war to make the world safe for democracy, the war to end all wars with its 17 million casualties and countless catastrophic injuries, the conflict that introduced the world to the concept of total war, with the indiscriminate bombing of civilian urban centers and the development of weapons of mass destruction, including poison gas, the tank, the submarine, and the lethal efficiency of interlocking machine gun fire, all of which served as evidence to Eliot that Western civilization had collapsed, and which he sought to demonstrate through a heap of broken images and a series of fragments shored against the runes that he extracted from thousands of years of literature in several languages, extending back to Homer and Sophocles with the character of the blind transgender prophet Tiresias, and including Virgil's description of the palace, the Carthaginian queen Dido, the legend of the Fisher King, and Dante's view of the crowded plain of Purgatory, represented as early morning urban commuters in the unreal city of London, and continuing to William Shakespeare's farewell to that metropolis, The Tempest, with Ariel's song, "Full fathom 5 thy father lies." Those are pearls that were his eyes, and Andrew Marvell's At My Back I Always Hear Time's Winged Chariot Hurrying Near, as well as Thomas Kyd's Spanish tragedy, with the character Geronimo inciting a vicious cycle of revenge. All this begins with an allusion to the spring awakening pilgrimage of Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and continues with reminiscence of Europe before the war, and then a mix of other voices, a charlatan, tarot card reader, people in a late night bar room, a returned veteran's wife who's taken quinine in order to abort a sixth unwanted pregnancy, dock workers along the River Thames, Queen Elizabeth I in a secret sexual encounter in a boat on the river, its tent of trees having been broken by wartime aerial bombardment, and the acquaintance rape of a typist by her co-worker, culminating in a progressive journey to the east through the ancient elements of earth, wind, and fire, past the fallen towers of London, Vienna, Athens, and Alexandria, to finally ascend the barren slopes of Tibet, where the prayer wheels are turned perpetually with words of elegy and requiem scattered to the wind in an eternal hope for Shanti. Shanti. Peace. Although I'd studied the Wasteland previously, my real interaction with the poem began in 1999 when I met Elizabeth Adler, the founder and artistic director of the Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble, who I am very pleased to introduce to you now.
So I fell in love with The Wasteland after I read it in an English class at Roosevelt University. And when I first read it, it's in 5 pieces, and I thought it read like a Shakespearean play. And also, as I was listening to it for the first time, I started seeing movement. And then I went to graduate school at UIC, and I had to do a project that would be something in the style that I wanted to do. And I had already started working in dance theater, which combines all art forms to create a radical change in humankind, as Rudolf von Laban says. And The Wasteland, the first act of it, seemed like a great project. So I did it. People thought it was like really cool. And then I graduated school. And this is back in 2000. And I knew I wanted to start working on something, but nobody in Chicago was doing the work that I wanted to do. So sometimes you just have to start things on your own. And the first project that I ever did was T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And I started working with Jeff, and I worked with an amazing cast of 4 people. And we just started finding the voices and finding the characters. And then I put it up at what was the Bell Plain Studios back in 2001 in April, because April is the cruelest month. I always got to throw that in there. And people were really receptive to this style of work. And they're like, yes, you should totally do this. And I don't know if I was quite ready to start a company. So I ran away to Europe for a couple months, and I auditioned with some groups there. I did some workshops, and I had a wonderful time. But I realized that my time here in Chicago wasn't done. I also realized that since no one was doing work like I wanted to do, it might find its place, and there might be other artists like me. So I came back and started a whole new adaptation of this, and also did it with a couple other of Eliot's poems, and that ended up being Death's Dream Kingdom. But I always loved The Wasteland because, to me, it is a timeless classic piece that it was written after World War I. And Elliot was so passionate and so mourning the loss of civilization. And even though it talks some really heavy topics, it ends with Shanti, 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 which is all about peace and bringing hope back to oneself. And to me, this poem ends, even though it's called The Wasteland, ends with peace and love for humanity. And as we know, World War II happened and there's been multiple genocides around the world ever since then. But I feel like we can always learn something from this. So The Wasteland is what started Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble. And since then, we've also started an arts education program that works with around 2,000 kids a year in Chicago public schools, mostly in underserved communities. And I'm always really proud to say that 75% of these kids receive at least 30 or more classes a school year with one teacher. And it's interesting that to me, when I look at how Elliot wanted to rebuild community, and Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble's mission is to build community through the arts, one person, one story, one voice at a time. And the very first show that we had a chance to do here at our new space, well, I guess it's not new anymore, it's been 8 years, was TSLA's The Wasteland. And this is when I had a chance to reconnect with Jeff with a whole new cast. And then we added in visuals created by David Sorrell. And that added a whole nother layer because the visuals also help to tell the story. And one thing I've always gotten from people who have seen the show is that they understand the poetry more and they understand the story because it comes out through body, voice, and imagination, the actor's toolbox. And there's just something beautiful about the language. And to me, I love poetry because poetry to me is the essence of communication. And dance and physical theater is also the essence of body movement. And so combining the two together, you get a visceral feeling that helps bring the poetry to life. And so as we are closing out our 20th anniversary season, which was a 2-year retrospective, I've decided to bring back The Wasteland. The piece that started it all should close out our 20th anniversary, and it just seems like the perfect synthesis of poetry coming to life.
After the torchlight, red on sweaty faces.
After the frosty silence in the gardens.
After the agony in stony places.
The shouting and the crying of prison and palace and reverberation. Of thunder, of spring over distant mountains. He who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying with a little patience.
Here is no water, but only rock, and no water. The sandy road, the road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink amongst the rock. One cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry, and feet are in the sand. If there were water amongst the rock, dead mountain mouth, with curious teeth that cannot spit. Here one can neither stand, nor lie, nor sit. There's not even silence in the mountains, but red suns, dulling faces, and thunder without rain. There's not even solitude in the mountains, but rise there of thunder, and red sullen faces that sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water, and no rock, if there were rock, if there were water, and also water, spring, a pool amongst the rock, if there were the sound of water only, and not the cicada, or the dry grass singing,
since your appearance in the Chicago Dance Theater Ensemble's remount of an adaptation of that poem, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that experience.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me out for this interview. It was wonderful experience getting that production up and on its feet, right? We had 4 people in our core main group, and your amazing expertise with the dramaturgy.
Now, let's not be too generous.
Oh, no, we desperately needed that. Thank you again. That was beyond enjoyable because, again, we came in just as actors thinking, oh, we're going to perform this poem, but it was so much more than that when you stepped in with the history and the background and the time frame of the politics of when it was written came into play. So much so that we needed that influence to really get everything solidified. And one of my favorite core memories was we were at the Fulton Arts Center, right, the Fulton Art Collective.
On a freezing night following a blizzard,
Woo!
when I arrived.
So cold, yes. And the 4 of us were breaking down the text, learning, who's saying what and when, and it's not a linear poem, so it is very difficult to get in your mind to really wrap around what comes next. So I just remember the 4 of us walking that building, taking this long walk and saying the lines as quickly as we could to try to get it out and really in our bodies. Because as you know, that wasn't our main focus. We had so many elements to that piece, the dancing, and then we also had the character breakdowns and who you were interacting with at different parts. Video projections, some music interludes, and really all these big moving pieces. So the text was incredible, and of course it fueled the whole production and the plot line, but it was really only one of the elements in it.
It really was a wonderful production, and I was very pleased to be part of it. And now, 8 years later, 100 years after the publication, the piece lives on.
Yes, how wonderful. And we were lucky as well. We got to kind of take a little mini Chicago tour. We started at the Fulton Arts Center, and then it was our first production where Chicago Dance Theater Center Ensemble is now at the Ebenezer Church.
Right.
And then we took it to all the festivals. We got to do
Green
Rhino
Mill.
Fest, Green Mill, stood on Al Capone's table.
Yes, indeed.
Claim to
you did.
fame, for sure. I love that moment.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a great experience. And it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you.